Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is April 7th, and this is another of our bi-weekly SIG CLI calls. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. I forgot to put my name in the agenda of the organizer. Our agenda is pretty packed by now, so let's get on to the business. Announcements first. We're hours away from 121 release. If I remember correctly, I haven't seen any announcements, so I probably haven't missed one. So that means we're still on schedule for 121 later this week. If you got pinged by the release team, make sure to respond promptly and help with unblocking the release team and the 121 release. Secondly, the annual report. SIG CLI put together an annual report. I just earlier today went through the report, addressed all the comments. So make sure that if you have some time, read it. If you have comments, feel free to leave them there. And if there are no comments, we are hoping to merge that later this week. So Eddie, Sean, do you have any other announcements that you want to throw at the table?
No.
Okay. So let's move on to the introductions. I know that we have a couple of new folks or some that were not here for a very long time. So I will start with Nikita because I know she hasn't been around in a while. I know her. A lot of folks know her, but I can't remember seeing her in a SIG CLI in a while. So I'll let her speak who you are, what you're expecting from SIG CLI.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I think I haven't really attending any SIG CLI meetings, but it's nice to see you all. I think I've met some of you at KubeCon and other places. So I'm Nikita. I'm one of the technical leads for SIG Contributor Experience. I'm also on the Kubernetes steering committee, and I dabble in a few other SIGs here and there. About SIG CLI, I came across an issue about adding sub-resource support to kubectl. So Yuvraj, who's my colleague, so you both decided to write a cap for it. So we're going to be talking about that today. It's kind of fun.
Okay, so I'm guessing Yuvraj was called to the table. You want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Hey, hi everyone. My name's Yuvraj. I've attended only a couple of SIG CLI meetings a few times. And yeah, I work with Nikita. So we are attending this session today to discuss about the KEP for the sub-resource support in kubectl and do a small demo on how that works.
Cool, welcome. Okay, am I seeing anyone new also on the call? Feel free to speak up, introduce yourself, explain what you're looking for, what you're interested in with regards to SIG CLI. I'm scrolling quickly through the list. I think I've seen the remaining names. But if I missed you, feel free to speak up. Okay, hearing none. So we can continue with the rest of the talk. With the rest of the meeting, which brings us back to Nikita and Yuvraj. Do you want to share your screen, or you just need to have the enhancement opened?
I could I could walk through a little bit on the cap, and then Yuvraj would probably give the demo. So I could share my screen.
Yeah, let me make you a co-host, and I stop sharing. Yeah, you should be good.
Okay, just a second.
I do have a quick announcement. I have been drowning with KubeCon talk stuff. I think Maciej has as well. So apologies if we're not responding to anything. We're both definitely trying to get caught up right now. So feel free to ping us again on anything.
we are on code freeze, so you shouldn't be approving anything anyway.
True.
Cool. Then I'm just going to start. We had opened a POC PR almost a month ago at this point to get some initial feedback. Initial feedback was positive, so we went ahead and wrote a CAP for this. So the whole point is that the CAP proposes adding a new flag sub-resource to kubectl to specifically to the get, apply, patch, edit, and replace commands to for specifically for getting and updating or patching sub-resources. And at this point, we're just looking at status and scale sub-resources. Supporting other sub-resources is a non-goal. This is both for built-in types and for CRDs. And another thing is like, why are we doing this? So right now, there is absolutely no way to, well, you can't really update sub-resources via kubectl. You can do that using curl, or you can write like use client go, or you can just use a client directly, but it isn't really possible via kubectl. So and it's kind of useful when you're like scripting or debugging or testing things. So this whole point is that it adds sub resources as a first class option in kubectl, so that like we can work with the API in a generic fashion. So to talk a little bit about the behavior, I think the most important point is this, and we've called it out a few times in the CAP, but I had like someone left a comment on the PR, so I will expand a bit more on this in the CAP later on too. So the whole point is that when you update, when you say like sub-resource equals status, it's supposed to be updating the status part of the resource. But then if you have a controller which is already running against the main resource that reconciles the status part, then the status field is not updated. So this ensures that there is no arbitrary data in status, and that's kind of what we want. This holds true for both built-in types and CRDs. But if you don't have a controller, for example, like running against a custom resource and you update status will get updated. So that is one thing, and I wanted to check if that behavior makes sense and if there were any concerns around that behavior. So that was one point. Another thing was around how, like, if you do a kubectl get on sub-resource status, what is like how would the table get displayed? So we are like, we've updated the POC and like in the CAP to just display whatever the columns would be for the main resource for both custom resources and built-in types. But we could update this too. Like I think it's a little bit more involved for doing it for built-in types. For CRs, we actually did it and then reverted it back to ensure like it's both consistent across built-in and custom resources. So I wanted to get feedback on what would be the expectation around how this would be displayed. And just to cover, I know we have like other things on the agenda, so I'll keep it quick too. If like we use so like only status and scale sub resources supported. So if you specify invalid sub resource, you'll give an error. If you specify a sub resource that's not supported, it'll give a not found error. So all of like these commands are supported for all types. Another point that was actually someone brought it up recently, yesterday, was supporting listing and watching for sub resources too. So I wanted to get feedback on, like, we haven't included it here, but we can if that's desired as well, which sort of makes sense. So I wanted to get feedback on that. So like specifically like feedback on the broad idea of the CAP and specifically on updating the status behavior. Like, is that how it should be working? What would be the expectation for the table display, and should we be supporting listing and watching for resources? So we could go ahead with the demo, or like if anyone have questions, I could take it up right now.
I think we can wait with the questions for after the demo.
Sure. I will then stop sharing my screen so you guys can share it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, in this demo, we'll actually look at using the sub-resource flag with 3 commands, especially get, patch, and apply. And we'll be doing the same for both built-ins and CRTs. So I currently have we'll be using the deployment as an example for the built-in type because it supports both scale and status sub-resources. So I have a deployment called nginx deployment. So let me try to patch the scale sub-resource of this deployment and then change the beside replicas to 2, right? So let me just get that snippet. So this basically patch the kubectl, patch the deployment object, and as you can see, we pass the sub-resource scale object, and the JSON path then specified points to like is the JSON path of the auto-scaling v1 scale type object. And if you now look at the deployment, you see that it's down to 2. And we can actually now get the sub-resource. So sub-resource status. Sub-resource status would print exactly the same information as the resource itself, because right now it gets the entire object and uses the exact same column definitions as the original resource. But if you use sub-resource scale, this one actually gets the scale object associated with that corresponding deployment, and we define new column definitions for the scale object so that it prints 2 columns, like the desired replicas and the available replicas. So that is how the scale and sub-resource get and patch work for built-in types, and this is exactly how they would work for CRDs as well. I have a CRD installed already on this cluster. It's called VM set examples, and its definition looks like this. Under its sub-resources, I have both status and scale enabled on this CRD, and it right now has 2 columns, and one of the columns actually points to a field in status. So let me actually create a CR of this type. So this CR, this instance of CR does not have any status information present in it at this point. And let me also mention that there is no controller associated with this CRD right now. So any changes that we make to the CRD are coming through kubectl and not from any other place. So if we do one, we'll see that the available column, which we saw is getting a value out of status, is currently empty because there is no status information set on this. But now we can use kubectl to actually update status on the CRD, and this time let's use apply to update the status. So kubectl apply. And I need to specify the sub-resource equal to status. This makes sure that the update is actually happening on the status. And it's also important to note that while we do this call, it only considers the changes that are made to the status subsection of the resource. Any changes that are made to like spec or other parts will be completely ignored, and only the status changes will be applied. Oh, sorry. And that's now updated. So if we actually get, you'll see that it now has the status information available. And CRDs also support the same get sub-resource status and get sub-resource scale. So if we do status, we'll see again, it uses the exact same columns that are defined for the CRD in additional printer columns. We don't do anything different with it. And it also supports scale. So it again prints the exact same column definitions as in built-in types, just so that we are consistent. And it prints the corresponding scale object associated with this with the CRD. Yeah, that's the end of the demo. So we've seen how apply, get, and patch all work with the new sub-resource flag. The sub-resource flag actually also supports replace, is supported in the replace and edit commands as well. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I have one question. The resource that you applied, was that the entire resource of the VM set or only a sub-resource, the status? I remember you've mentioned that the sub-resource only looks at the sub-resource bit, but the question is whether the YAML itself was entire or just the status sub-resource. Are you muted?
The YAML itself that I applied, which update the status, actually had everything, but it only considers the changes in the status.
Okay, it always has to be entire resource or it can be a partial?
I haven't tested that, but I think it can be partial. I
Okay.
think it can be partial.
With regards to printing, you're currently using the server-side printing columns, which is fine, I think, and that will work just in the default printer, okay. But I assume as soon as you switch to output YAML or JSON or anything else, it will throw the only the sub-resource bit. Let's say if I ask for YAML.
Yeah, so if you ask for YAML and if you choose the sub-resource scale, it will show you the scale sub-resource object. Yeah. So it will actually do the auto-scaling we want. But if you do sub-resource status, it will actually print the JSON of the entire resource.
So the entire resource. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. So for the apply, do you put this sub-resource in the last applied annotation for client-side apply? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, but I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to go back and check if the actually we can check it right now, right? The annotation if it's getting applied.
Yeah, I think if you could check that. So if it's not there, then it will be difficult to impossible to delete the sub-resource. I'm not sure what that means. So for client side with the last applied annotation, there may be some nuance.
Yeah, there's a logic that is comparing the previous state with the current state, so it would be good to include the applied changes in that annotation, similarly to what the normal apply does. So yeah, that's I think a implementation detail. Nikita, you had questions about watching and getting. Can you repeat them once again?
Sure. So like for context, this stemmed up when I was talking to some Knative developers. So they have very big custom logic where they try to watch deployment resources, but they only care about replicas. So what they wanted was a mechanism to be just like watch the scales of resource for deployments. So we haven't really implemented like support for listing and watching sub resources, but I just wanted to check if it made sense and if that should be supported as well.
I think if the API server allows you to do this, on the other hand, the sub resource is usually invoked against a specific resource. So I think it's okay if we initially say that we don't support that, and we can always revisit the decision later on. I think that will simplify the implementation initially, and then we can always put a to-do or a feature directions to modify the cap further, unless someone else has any other opinions. Yeah, go ahead. You're right.
Yeah, so I just checked in the cluster that I was using for the demo, and the last applied configuration annotation on the resource does not capture the changes to the status sub resource as of this as of now.
Yeah,
And
so
they-
that will be probably an implementation detail to solve during working on it. The other question that you had also, Nikita, was about updating the status sub-resource, especially for the built-ins. Out of curiosity, have you tried what happens if you kubectl edit, I don't know, a deployment? Is it possible to update a status? I'm pretty sure that the controller will pick it up very quickly and override your changes. But I'm pretty sure that the server does not reject those kind of updates.
Yes. Yes.
So I would probably follow the same guidelines, as in it's possible to update anything, but it should be up to a user's reasonable judgment not to update the status. And in most cases, the controller will fix this status shortly after getting an update, because usually it will just respond to an update with reconciling and figuring out that there's a difference between the actual state and what the status says.
Yeah.
I had one more quick comment. Sorry to interrupt. So on server side apply, we now have the force conflicts in the field manager flag, and so I'm guessing you want to be, if you're the field manager or the owner, or maybe not, for when you change this, you know, say for instance, the replicas, and you may end up having to call force conflicts in order to not collide with a controller. You know, if there is a controller that's in charge of some of the fields that you're modifying. So when it comes to the server side apply, I think we have to take into account the field manager and conflicts, like who's going to own that field.
Right, Sean, but that is handled internally by the server-side apply mechanism, such that if you try to even edit a sub-resource, you have to explicitly say force.
That's what I'm thinking.
Apply. You would have to explicitly say force to override the field manager and
Yep.
take ownership of the field. And on top of that, I remember that the deal is that all the controllers will always work as force, which means they will always override any changes. There's no ownership for a controller. The controller is the primary owner of the status resource, and it is free to change any applied updates.
So I think the server-side apply would fail unless you actually add this extra force conflicts flag.
Yeah.
For server-side apply.
I think that the mechanisms are already in place, and it's not something that we should worry about. So are there any other questions? Oh yeah, you've arrived. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question. I just want to confirm. I just wanted to confirm that, like, when you do the edit action, the change actually goes through, it passes. You can see that in the response that the value is changed, but then the controller quickly reconciles it back to the original value. So if you do a get immediately, you'll see that there was no change observed, and that's the behavior that is happening right now as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what I would expect as well. And this is literally what you should be also allowing. It will be simpler for you if you don't have to have any special exceptions for, oh, we don't update this because we thought that it won't be good. So I would keep it simple, and we can always revisit the decision afterwards and change them if there will be requests coming from the community. Okay, last call for for questions? If not, we will be moving to the other topic. Okay, thank you very much, Nikita. Thank you very much, Ivarash. That was very nice. I do promise to have a look at the cap in the upcoming weeks, I say, because that's more achievable. Okay, Ricardo, you put 2 issues on the agenda.
Yeah, I am really noisy. Sorry. Okay.
I wouldn't call it noisy. I would say you were busy. Go ahead.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. So the first one is about the exit code normalization. We've been talking about that, I guess, in the last 3 or 4 meetings. And so I have started to write a cap about that. I didn't do any demo or nothing yet, but I have an idea of how to start this. But as we delegate every error check to a function in common utils, maybe it's worth to, instead of using that function, writing a new one, because we always will have at least 2 to 3 steps in each command, right? That's the complete, the validation, and the run. So complete and validation, as far as I got, they only run on the client side. So we can assess like, okay, there was a validation error. I'm gonna exit with an exit code 2. There was a complete error. I'm gonna exit with exit code 1, and that's and you can like early drop, right? But the run error is one that's pretty hard to assess, and if you take a look into that function, that's a 6-year-old function, the check error one. So probably it's worth to discuss if we can improve that function, or move to or like make movement to another function that can assess like if it was an API error, or if it was like a local error, the error was forbidden. So I have proposed that we at least start writing the expected error codes that we think, like separating from 1 to 64 being like client-side errors, and from 65 to 127 from server side, and the 128 to moving forward, it's like some external common error occurring. So like if diff returns an error code, it's going to be the kubectl return code will be something like 128 plus the error code from diff. So you can at least know which was the error code from diff and not from kubectl. So also it can help with plugins and so on. So my idea is at least we start mapping in this cap how we expect the error codes to be mapped, and maybe adding them to a file that can be further used to automatically generate documentation about the error codes. And then we can start discussing how can we migrate the functions from each of the commands to use like the new check error function, or if actually we want to break this thing also, or if we want to have like some sort of flag to change the behavior if we are like changing the exit codes or not, so we can also allow the users to have time to migrate their CI or something like that, because probably they are not expecting some error to occur in validate, or they are going to say, okay, everything is green even if validate is failing, but I'm not getting like error code 0, or like if a namespace is not being found, a research is not being found. So in the future, if you do a kubectl get namespace, it's going to return an exit code. So you need to say, okay, I want this to happen. But I try to put everything that I thought in this cap. There are a lot of like open points to discuss also, and that's it.
So first of all, and probably the most important one, none of the changes from this particular cap should affect the current way of working with kubectl. So if any given current command fails with a non-zero exit code, it should still fail as a non-zero exit code after the change. So I wouldn't expect suddenly validate or run to fail where it wasn't previously failing. So, and this basically means we need to maintain the backwards compatibility. And currently nobody is relying on any particular exit codes. So the only guarantee that we currently give is if we succeed, we return 0 as any regular process, or we return non-zero if we fail, but we don't specify the exit codes yet. So that's the first important distinction between about maintaining the backwards compatibility with regards to failing. I really like the idea of creating several buckets for, oh, it failed incomplete, oh, it failed in validation, or failed from server-side operation. On the other hand, I think we should probably focus not from a programmer's point of view on the error codes, but rather from a client point of view. Any normal kubectl user does not know that, I don't know, get has complete, validate, and run methods, and it should never know about that. He will only care about, oh, get failed, and we need to be able to explicitly give the information why it failed. So the distinction between, oh, I failed because there was a problem contacting the server, versus, oh, there is a problem on the server expressed through the exit code. Yes, that makes sense. I see a comment from Sean that Antoine was recently working on exit codes for kubectl diff. It would be good to have a look at that particular thing. And before we actually start implementing, like you just said, creating, I'm not even saying that it will be complete, because we will say this is an alpha functionality, so it might change, it will change over the several releases, but still slowly try to ship them, but identify at least set of groups. And what you proposed about several buckets, about whether that was a local change, a local problem because, I don't know, the internet is not working or something like that, or that there was a server-side issue, totally makes sense. Eddie.
So I get what you're saying about the backwards compatibility there, Mache, but is that something that we can put on a regular deprecation path?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Did you take that in mind in your KEP, Ricardo?
I mean, the
Yeah.
question, the question will be more about, do you expect any particular changes in how we return the exit codes these days?
Yeah, so there is a problem actually of some things that don't return exit code, but they return on standard error. So like the one case that I could map in one issue was the kubectl get any resource and the resource is not found, like a namespace that's not found or a pod that's not found. So there was a complaint about that. You are muted. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a very thin line with get and returning an error when you can't find, and when you don't have access, and when something does not exist. We purposefully do not differentiate the error codes between the three, because by doing so, we would expose information about the structure and the information present in the cluster. If you would get information that you don't have access to this pod or a namespace, you clearly have an information, yes, something like pod A or namespace A exists versus you're getting a not found, which means you either don't have access, it might actually not exist, or there's something else. And with those errors, I will always reject any questions or any issues that will be pointing. I know that users have hard time figuring out if you do a small typo, but this is basically about my all-time favorite similar issue is when you're trying to log in, the proper secure login form will tell you that the user and or password is incorrect without pointing to which one is incorrect. Because if the form is clearly saying, oh, the password is wrong, you can easily tell and guess the username and then just iterate and focus on the password itself instead of trying to match, user and password. The same applies for getting resources. So for those cases, you have to be very careful and look at those cases one by one before introducing different error codes.
Okay, but in case like if you try to create something or change something that you are not allowed to do, it's worth to, right?
Yeah,
Because you get the forbidden.
Yeah, I mean, as long as we have a clear information from the server, because for get, the no resource found is actually coming from the server. So as long as we have a clear information from the server, yes, we can translate that to a proper exit code.
Okay.
That will be my best approach to not expose too much, but not exposing enough information.
Okay, got it. So Eddie asked about if I have some sort of deprecation path. Yeah, so somewhere in this cap I wrote that like 1 month ago, but there is a flag that if you wanna use like the old behavior or the new one, like the old one is not keeping like not exiting with like the new exit codes, the new one, right? And the old one is like keep the way it is. I'm thinking about how to deal with that and pass this information to the error checker if we add this as a global flag. But my idea is probably to have like a flag so users won't be catch into this as a new default behavior.
I would probably go with, so there are two paths. We can hide this new behavior behind an environment variable, similarly to what Sean did with the headers for commands. That will be a global information, and that's probably the most consistent way.
It's the easier also.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but I would still try to and encourage you to, stick with the current mechanism, and we will dissect each and every single case one by one and figure out whether we want to change the behavior of a particular command or not, and only then, go one by one. But my ideal case would be at least have a rather global view of all the commands and somewhat identified buckets of different exit codes like you described earlier.
Okay, sounds good. If anyone also wants like to review and put your opinions there, I would be more than happy to discuss that.
I would totally suggest to write an email to both SIG CLI and Kubernetes Dev about this cap that you have open. Make sure to tweet about it as well, I have no idea where else we can talk about it, but Eddie is raising his hand, so he's probably Slack as well. Try to reach out as many different channels as possible. Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, so I had two things. So on that note, I think that this is a good opportunity for us to engage a lot of folks who aren't in the community and get their feedback and thoughts. A lot of the people that are going to be dealing with exit codes are going to be your system administrators and your CI/CD integrators, right? So they're the ones who are really going to be caring. CI/CD is a great story there to actually dig into, like, what do people want to see in their Jenkins pipeline? So yeah, I could definitely help shop that around. So I'll talk to you offline about that. The other thing is, so I think the idea of adding a standard code to the plugin code that's actually like really clever and brilliant. Is that like based on any prior, have you seen that ever before where you can like do math to figure out like the subcommand's exit code?
Yeah, I guess Java or Java running inside Kubernetes, when you have out of memory, you'll get an error code that's up to 128. I can't remember, Eddie, but I will figure out with folks from my company, because the error code that you get when a pod exits because of out of memory is the sum of like 127 plus something internal. But yeah, I will try to figure out where is this written, so we can actually have like a prior art. I am not that genius, sorry.
You're a genius because you're spending your time putting this together. That's the important bit.
Yeah,
Nikita wrote in the chat, which is a very good suggestion, to write a blog post for Kate's for Kubernetes blog, where we can discuss that this is something that we are looking at, and we would like to gather as much feedback, because this is something that it will be very hard for only us to have a clear information. We have to gather a lot of feedback on this one before we start implementing, because the feedback will be the best source of information about the exit codes that people do expect from kubectl commands, than any kind of resources that we can, or any kind of man pages you're going to go through, source code of any other commands. So yeah, as many as possible outreach about that we're working on it and we would like to gather feedback is the best.
Sure. Thank you, folks.
Okay. We still have about 13 minutes, so Ricardo, you had one more about...
Yeah, this one is simple. If someone has something else and wants, because I have like, or I can like bring this really quickly. So anyone wants to? Yeah, okay. So this is someone asked to do a feature create config map with labels. And I was wondering if we shouldn't be taking care like of having all the create commands with labels instead of just config map, because labels, they are used by almost anything, right? So you have labels that are used to be selectors in network policies and so on. And also maybe we should discuss about annotation as well. So there is a last comment there about labels and if we should take care of annotations as well, and being this like a global function that can be used by any create command. And on the other hand, I guess there was somewhere in some issue, I think Sean or someone else told that we should probably be thinking about the create comments, right? I don't know if it was Sean or if it was Phil. So I don't want to bring anything that can be like deprecated in the future, or that's not something that we don't want. But as a user, I think that we should probably be thinking about having the labels and the annotations as some sort of flags for any create command, because they are broadly used and this can be really helpful. Like I added the annotations in create ingress command because ingress controllers, they use annotations for almost everything. So I'm just looking into feedback for that as well.
Okay. I'll let other folks have a look at it.
We recently did one of these over the summer, I think, actually. We added annotation to something, and Phil was definitely against adding it, but gave in at the end. I agree with you that it should be consistent across everything. If we're going to have it for one thing, it should be just top level for the create command, and it should apply to every resource.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking through how for.
I know that some sorry.
Create, but
I know that some
somehow...
folks don't oh, sorry. But
Yeah,
go ahead. Yeah. I am with the delay. I can't hear. I'm gonna put on mute. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was looking at the create. Apparently, there's a label or selector flag that we currently have for create. I wonder how this works with create. Getting or applying with that label, I know what it does, but I can't imagine how this applies to creating resources. I do agree that something like that seems reasonable. So it's just about how to wire it properly. And yeah, so go ahead, what you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was saying that I know that some folks are really against, like we using annotations as like some sort of fields. Mostly notable, I usually argue with Tim Hawking about that, but because of the nature of at least ingress controllers, we need annotations, but maybe we shouldn't be relying so much on annotations. But on the other hand, labels, probably at least labels, we should really take a look into that, because they are really used by anything here. So even like network policy selectors, service selectors, so it's worth to, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree about that approach, especially that labels are the most important primitive for organizing resources in some logical groups.
My hot take there is either I would say we either implement it at the top level, or we deprecate it for the individual resources that it's enabled for under create. Because if it's in a sub resource and it's not in other resources, I get the confusion for the users. And it makes for more maintainable code if we don't have that replicated and duplicated for every single sub thing, as opposed to just being at the top level. So that would be my take on that.
My take would be not deprecate, but add across the board, because it will make lives for many people easier. So yeah. Okay. Are there any last minute topics? Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot, Ricardo. Are there any last minute topics that people wanted to bring up? Okay, hearing none. Do we have any stand-up updates from the sub-projects or from folks that want to share what they've been working on over the past weeks?
I got a question. Nick, has Kui ever been on the Kubernetes blog?
No.
I think we could get Kui on there, especially because now it's an official project and the code's been migrated.
Nice.
I think that would be awesome.
Okay. Should I write? Should I suggest? Like, what's the protocol for that?
If you want to alter a blog post, I think that's awesome.
Okay.
If not, I'm sure we can, write one up and figure out someone who wants to do that.
Okay. No, I'm happy to write it. Is there a, maybe you can send me privately if there's a PR process for that?
Yeah, that's literally what is required. You basically create a PR against the Kubernetes website project. There's a subdirectory, which is literally a blog, And then if nobody reaches out to you in some reasonable time, we can just ping the necessary folks to get them published. But you basically open a PR, ping us, we review, and then the content management team handles the publication date for us.
Markdown or?
Markdown.
Okay, great.
Markdown images are totally acceptable. I'll send you an exemplary PR that I've been working with a coworker of mine for cron jobs for 121 release.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a great idea. Thanks, Eddie.
Oh, Chris Kim actually posted an example PR from Cornelius about crew. So you can check out that website poll 188097.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool. Are there any other topics that people want to bring up? Okay. Hearing none, I'll give you back about 5 minutes of your time. Thank you very much, all. That was a very productive meeting today. And it was, as usual, nice talking to you all. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you, folks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.